Go. Okay. Good morning. Welcome everyone to our webinar this morning. My name is Mary Collins and I'm the Director of the BC Healthy Living Alliance Secretariat. We're really pleased that you're all joining us today, and gather we have folks here from the north, the south, the interior, and Vancouver Islands. And we're here today to look at some examples of planning in the BC context. BCHLA firmly believes that a healthy built environment provides the context for health. And this webinar is following on the heels of Fraser Health's Healthy Living Trade Show, which has just been held, and it highlighted collaborative action in creating healthier communities. In fact, two of our three speakers today hail from the Fraser region, and we're really excited to find out more about what they've been doing. Great stuff. And while improving the built environment is a complicated and a long-term issue for local government, there are many smaller and incremental pieces that we can start on right away or phase in as public will or funds permit. The health of our citizens depends on our ability to make the healthy choice the easy choice, and a supportive environment is a critical element of achieving this goal. We're going to hear from three different BC communities today about their approaches, but we also want to hear about some great examples from your communities. And before we get rolling, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, if you have trouble hearing me, try turning up the volume on your phone or computer. And as I mentioned, we really want to get your input today, but we find that too many speakers leads to too much static. So we'll be asking you to use the control panel on the right-hand corner of your screen. You can have a look at that. Type in your questions for our speakers as you think of them at any time. We're planning to have a question period after each speaker and then a final round at the end of the three presentations. And we're also going to want you to participate in some polls. We'll give you a heads up that the poll is coming, and you will see a blue screen that has multiple choice questions. Please respond to the poll by using your mouse to click on your choice, or in some case choices. You'll have a few seconds to do so, and then we get these instant results that we can able to share with everyone, the panelists, and get your feedback. So it makes it kind of fun. Again, we really want to hear your questions and comments, so you can submit them at any time, either during the presentation or after. Just type them in the question box on the top right-hand side of your screen. And also, if you could indicate if there's someone in particular to whom you're addressing your question or comment. And we'll answer as many as we can in the time permitted, and if we miss any, we'll send out a post-event email with those that have not been able to answer during the webinar. So that's the sort of background, and let's get started. But first of all, we want to start with a question for you. And since this is a webinar about the healthy built environment, and it takes all aspects of community involvement to support this, we'd like to know a little bit more about you and your interests. So our first poll is going to ask you, what sector are you representing here today? And you'll see you've got local government, provincial government, NGO, private sector, individual. Poll is open, but good. People are doing it pretty fast. One more. Okay. Well, it looks like the majority of 39% are from the provincial government, 24% local government, 15% NGO, and 21% are individuals. So we've got a really nice cross-section here. Now we've got a second question. So obviously you're involved, and we'd like to know about some of the ways that you are involved in the healthy built environment. So please check all that apply to you, and there's 5 different options. So what aspects of the built environment are you interested in addressing? And you'll see there's 5 options. Check as many as you are appropriate to you and pertinent. Getting up there? Yeah. Clearly. Great. Well, 94% want healthy, are interested in healthy neighborhood design. The next 86% healthy natural environments, 83% in healthy transportation, 78 in healthy food, 78 in healthy housing. So actually you're all interested in all of them, which is great. You know, the healthy built environment can include so many different aspects of our community, so it's really important to get your feedback on where your communities are moving next as well. Now, just before we move on to the presentations, I would like to get you to start thinking about some of the built environment issues and examples from your own communities. So when our speakers finish, we're going to be turning it over to you to provide that kind of input as well. So let's move on with our presentations. And I'd first of all like to welcome Kelly Cameron. Kelly is our first speaker, and we're really excited to find out more about what the District of Mission is doing to make better use of the forest next door. As you know, Mission isn't that far from Vancouver, but it has this fabulous forest area. Kelly herself is a forest technologist who's worked for the District of Mission for the past 17 years. She's going to outline the plans to make the district's forest lands into family-friendly destination for wellness. Kelly's been working with various partners in promoting responsible recreation use of Mission's tremendous municipal forest asset. The District of Mission has set up mountain bike trails for beginners, campsites at Stave Lake, and other family-friendly recreation opportunities. But Kelly, let's get you to tell us all about it. Over to you.
Good morning. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to participate on the panel today. I hope you will find some useful information that can be applied within your communities. I'm going to speak about two of the initiatives that we are undertaking to encourage a back-to-nature approach to a healthy community. Next slide, please. We all know that more children are spending less time outdoors in our digital world. Houses are larger, yards are smaller. By losing a connection with nature and physical exercise, there is a disturbing trend towards childhood obesity, attention disorders, and depression. Our children are experiencing more chronic disease from an earlier age, as well as losing respect for the environment. We took hold of the work Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv, which brings together the research indicating that direct exposure to nature is essential for healthy childhood development and for the physical and emotional health of children and adults. Louv offers practical solutions and simple ways to heal the broken bond, and many are right in our own backyards. Next slide. Since 1958, Mission has managed one of the first community forestry operations in BC. We have what is called a provincial tree farm license containing 10,500 hectares of forests surrounding the Stave and Hayward hydro reservoirs. Within our license, we carry out sustainable small-scale harvesting of about 60 hectares per year, as well as reforestation and recreation development for the economic benefit of Mission. The municipal forest is roughly 26 times the size of Stanley Park, with numerous trails and quiet logging roads that you can explore on foot. In just minutes from our downtown, you can be surrounded by beautiful forests and babbling brooks. Next slide. Mission is very much a small town of 38,000 people within an ever-growing metropolis. We have 2.6 million people on our front door, and we are in the heart of the Fraser Basin. We are fortunate to have the many advantages of living so close to many communities and to be able to share in healthy living initiatives and facilities. But we recognize that Mission needed to capitalize on our biggest asset, access to natural amenities and our forests, lakes, and mountains for more than just revenue, harvesting revenue for our city. Next slide. Our first project is land use revisioning. We identified our key issues within our community. Number one, how can we incorporate the need to draw our visitors and keep our residents in Mission as a tourism destination with our forest assets and our current social issues currently taking place on our lands, and the lack of legal planning framework other than our license to complete our forestry practices. Number two, what do we need in order to provide family-friendly and affordable opportunities with nature-based learning? And number three, how can we balance the needs of our working forest with enhanced recreation and potential investments? Next slide. Our catalysts were our assets. There are 5 beautiful lakes, trails, and scenic areas within the district. And in the heart of the West Stave is the Zajac Ranch for Children. And recently, the Tim Horton Children's Foundation announced their intent to develop the first camp in BC in the northern part of the District of Mission. In order to make this happen, we need to make changes and develop strong partnerships. Aboriginal Tourism of BC has assisted us in making key connections with our local First Nations to get valuable buy-in in the early stages. The Fraser Valley Mountain Bike Association members have donated thousands of hours of trail maintenance for our mutual benefit, and the province of BC is supporting our vision for improving the Crown resources. Next slide. This is the unfortunate position that we find ourselves in, and one of the reasons why we have spent the last 5 years setting out to make significant changes. We have the first ungated and unregulated access to Crown land when heading east from Vancouver, which brings with it the undesirable element of recreators, garbage dumping, illegal shooting, fires, reckless driving. Our residents and visitors actually leave our community to have their safe family outdoor experiences. Next slide. Being caught in a multi-jurisdictional area has been the main obstacle, but Mission chose to be the unifying agency to bring all the parties to the table to take the next steps. After identifying our key issues, our next step involved obtaining a provincial planning layer over our existing license, called an interpretive forest, which is a status that then allows us to create recreational planning objectives alongside our sustainable harvest plans. We completed a feasibility study and an economic impact analysis and worked closely with our Tourism Committee and Economic Development Office in order to develop the partnerships and secure the funding sources required to bring our vision to fruition. Next slide, please. This has enabled the Ministry of Forests to invest $170,000 this year in setting up the first campground infrastructure on one of the key lakes in our areas. This is Sayers Lake here, which was being decimated by unregulated ATV use throughout the foreshore. With the funding from the province, we assisted them by administering and coordinating the required development plans due to their staffing limitations. This campground is managed by the Crown with a 24-hour host camper, and plans are underway for the Crown to partner with one of the local First Nations bands in a long-term management agreement. More planning is now underway to develop additional campgrounds, and we are working on zoning areas for specific motorized and non-motorized recreation use. The goal is not to turn the area into a highly regulated provincial park type scenario, but to still allow quads, dirt bikers, and four-wheel drives, and hikers, horseback riders, and mountain bikes, but in specific designated areas to reduce the potential for user conflict and for each group to take an ownership role and the proper use. Next slide. We see our interpretive forest as a way to provide safe, family-friendly, and affordable outdoor recreation to our residents and visitors. We will draw on our First Nations partners to assist us in sharing their history of the area with interpretive signage, as well as to be able to provide forest education. We have been in contact with zip trek and wakeboard operators, ATV and snowmobile clubs to develop additional opportunities. And one of our hardest working groups, as I said before, was the Fraser Valley Mountain Bike Association. We went from random trail builders doing their own thing on our lands without our permission to a large group of dedicated volunteers and riders setting out to make the trails into a mountain bike destination. Overall, this has been a huge undertaking with our limited staff, but we've been able to move forward towards our goals. Next slide. And our second project is one that I personally developed last year to bring more attention to our forestry trails and to get families out on them. As long as our municipal forest operation has been around, we have not spent much time or money to actively promote outdoor recreation use. As a mom to a 7-year-old and in speaking with other parents at his school, surprisingly there is little awareness of our managed forests and the opportunities that exist there. As a building block to bringing more awareness for legitimate uses of the area, I wanted to develop a trail passport system specifically targeting elementary school children and their families. I came across a very simple way to accomplish this when searching online, specifically borrowing a model from Muskoka, Ontario. We provided each elementary school child with a passport in their year-end school packages they receive. It's simply a double-sided 8.5 by 11 sheet folded in half, which you can see here. We chose 5 trails throughout the district and provided a brief description of the trail and access and left a box to fill in the trail code. Along each trail, we installed a trail code on a bright yellow sign for participants to locate during their hike with words like active, explore, and trek. Once the passport was completed, it could be submitted to be entered for draw prizes for items such as backpacks, leisure center passes, walking sticks, a GPS, and a digital camera. The Trail Passport program was also advertised in our local newspaper on our city page, as well as on our website, in property tax notice inserts, and at the leisure center and visitor info centers. We are continuing the program again this year with 3 new trails and repeating 2 of our favorites. And now I believe we have a poll question for you so that you can help guide us with your ideas as we continue our planning. So the question that we'd like to know from you is, nature deficit disorder is a concern for the health of our children, and to address this, where would you feel your priorities are, where we should invest our tax dollars? So please select all that that you think would apply.
Getting up there with the answers. Right. Well, Kelly, can you see the answers?
Yes, I can there.
Okay. So go ahead and let people know.
Okay, so looks like encouraging more outdoor activities is a top priority, probably equally with building more trails and campgrounds to get out on there. And I agree that we need to get back to into the school system here and really teach about health and nature with our children, for sure. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Kelly.
I think I have one more slide. My final thoughts are that if we want to change our children's future for health and their environment, we must spend the time and money to educate and create the opportunities for them. And it's hard work, but it's so necessary, and it enables us to participate as families, getting unplugged and reconnecting with each other. And I'd love to take any of your questions that you have.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. That's wonderful. We're all going to want to come out and visit you and visit Stave Lake. It looks so beautiful. And I think it's really interesting that you were able to take an idea from Muskoka and apply it here in BC to your own community. And actually, first question is that for the passport program that you've introduced, just wondering what kind of a budget's involved in that and how many schools are involved.
So we got a hold of the numbers for the elementary age children from kindergarten to grade 7. It was approximately 3,500 children. The printing costs for us last year were $800. We split that between 4 of our departments, Parks and Rec, Forestry, the Economic Development Office, and also our Environmental Department. So we all kind of chipped in a couple $100 each from our budgets to complete that. The prizes, again, were also donated. Economic Development had a GPS from a trade show. They didn't end up awarding a prize. Parks and Rec donated leisure centers, and our department purchased a digital camera and a few walking sticks. So kind of was a collaborative approach within all of the departments here.
Great. I mean, it's a very small amount of money to be able to do so much. Do you have any idea what the uptake has been?
Last year we had teacher job action, which I think maybe limited the distribution of those passports. It's very hard to know, but in speaking with people on my son's teams, some people received them, some people didn't. So we only received 35 passports back. Whether it was because they didn't complete them all and felt that they couldn't submit it, it's really hard to tell. So this year we said you could submit 3 to 4 trails, and you could still enter. So we're hoping for a little bit of a different draw. And this year we decided not to print a brochure for each children in elementary school, and just advertise in our tax notices and our city page, and we'll blitz our city page probably 4 times throughout the summer here to get people. I know a lot of the passports were picked up at the Leisure Center by people visiting the Leisure Center throughout the summer. So that was our biggest intake of passports, but getting them back was not was a little bit disappointing.
Right. Well, you got to keep trying and working on it. And now Nikki has just come in and wondered, have you connected with the Child and Health Alliance? Child and Nature Alliance. I think you did mention that, in fact, because she's indicated if you haven't, she'd be glad to help you make that connection.
Okay, that's wonderful. We did enroll with David Suzuki's Back to Nature program as well to get ideas from that site and his Healthy Community Nature Connections. But no, we hadn't joined the Children's Alliance.
Good. Now, you've got a lot of different partners that you showed during your presentation, and do you actually have like a formal MOU with your partners, or how do you work with them?
It's just been through 5 years of communicating back and forth, and you know, we're stuck with dealing with very many jurisdictions. We have BC Hydro, we have the lands, the Ministry of Forests, Mines, Bylaw, RCMP, Conservation, independent power producers, other logging companies, TELUS as well. So it's just making those connections and keeping them up to date constantly, and just going back and forth, getting ideas, and trying to bring people and their dollars to the table as well. So far we're the lead role on that, and the expenditures are coming mainly out of Mission, but we have to do something with this area. We don't want to lose it. It's so close to teetering the other way that we need to bring it back in, and I think we've made the first steps to making that happen. So we'll just continue to plug forward with that as we can.
Great. Well, you've done a fabulous job, and I certainly will be an inspiration for other communities, because many of our communities in BC do have potential, you know, wilderness recreation opportunities. So I hope they'll be inspired to take actions like yours. Well done.
Great.
And don't forget, we will have another question period later on, so if you have other questions for Kelly, please make sure that you put them onto the question box.
Great.
So let's move on now, and it's my pleasure to introduce Margaret Manifold and Ian Wasson, who will be speaking to us about the City of Burnaby's work. Their work is to improve active transportation options for all users by looking to their seniors, their children, and mobility challenged citizens. City of Burnaby's Margaret Manifold is a social planner, and Ian Wasson is an urban design planner. So they've been working together, and they've both been with the city for over 10 years, and they'll describe their recent work to increase accessibility in Burnaby. They're going to talk about the MAP, the Mobility Access Planning Edmonds project, which brought together city engineers, planners, and citizens to look at the real-life challenges for those using mobility aids. And now they're just completing the MAP Cascade Heights project involving seniors and school children to determine the age-friendly routes in those areas and how to increase walkability in the neighborhood. So Margaret and Ian, over to you.
Great. Thank you. And hello, everyone. This is Margaret, obviously, I think, not Ian. We will be presenting on Burnaby's complete and accessible streets. Ian's going to start off with presenting 6 of the city's initiatives or strategies that we have in Burnaby for developing complete and accessible streets. And these initiatives all relate to healthy built environment principles because they promote active transportation and accessibility for all. And after Ian describes these, I will go into further depth about our MAP projects that Mary just mentioned, and to give an understanding of how they have contributed to the work that we're doing to develop our complete streets. And then once I finish, Ian will describe how these initiatives are actually getting put into action. So I'm going to pass it over to Ian right now.
Thanks, Margie. Next slide, please. There are 6 initiatives in particular that have contributed towards the implementation of our Complete Streets, or Accessible Complete Streets strategy. The first is our urban trail system. The next is our beautification strategy, our social sustainability strategy, complete streets strategies, the environmental sustainability strategy, and our MAP projects. Next slide, please. The oldest of these strategies is our urban trail strategy. We've been constructing these for the last 22 years. And we have a hierarchy of different trails. So the most well developed, you can see these are 4-meter wide trails. They're generally lit. And the intention was to have them as multi-use trail systems that would be both recreational and utilitarian to allow people to commute to work, etc. The network has been designed to connect to all 4 of Burnaby's town centers and to parks and recreation areas. We've got about 130 kilometers on the books to be constructed, and about 60 kilometers have been built. Next slide, please. The next initiative is our beautification strategy. It had 4 goals: to improve the public realm, to enhance experience for visitors and business community residents, to be environmentally, socially, and economically sustainable, to be strategic in nature, and by this we mean that we would place our dollars where we got the biggest bang for our buck, and to enhance the experience of travel, especially for alternative modes of transportation within the city. Next slide, please. The next strategy was our social sustainability strategy, which wrapped up in 2011. And this was a guide for the city's initiatives and resource allocations in the social realm. There were 7 strategic priorities. 6 of the priorities, or the 6th priority, was getting around. It was identified by the community as being a really important priority. Next slide, please. The next strategy was our complete streets, and this was a number of different strategies, including a new zoning called S-density, which was a doubling of density adjacent to SkyTrain stations in our town centers to build communities that were extremely oriented towards transit and pedestrians and also cyclists. The introduction of the MMCD, which is the Master Municipal Construction Design Standards. In this, we took this opportunity to upgrade all of our standards to permit us to construct complete streets. And then the new transportation plan, which is just underway at the moment, which will hopefully incorporate all of these different aspects to create a very different transportation network in Burnaby than has existed previously. Next slide, please. And then the strategy that is currently underway is our environmental sustainability strategy. It's a plan for Burnaby's green future. It's one of the fabled 3 legs of the stool. Our social sustainability strategy, our economic sustainable strategy have already been created, and with the creation of this, this will give us our 3rd leg. It provides direction on environmental protection and stewardship, enhancement of resilience in the city, and of course it's recognizing both current challenges and opportunities to make the city more resilient, especially in the uncertain times ahead with climate change. Our as I said, this strategy is actually currently underway, and the website down below, the www.burnaby.ca ESS input. If you've got any input you'd like to make, this is still open for the next week. And our final 6th strategy is MAP Edmonds. Next slide, please. And I'm turning it back to Margie to describe that in more depth.
Thanks, Ian. So I'm just going to talk briefly about our 2 MAP projects. Our first one, MAP Edmonds, originated with the Voices of Burnaby Seniors, or a seniors-driven community planning table that we have here. That is a table that's funded through the United Way. And in 2007, the Voices of Burnaby Seniors conducted an extensive survey of seniors in our community. And the survey asked respondents about their housing, transportation, health, and support needs. And the survey results showed that 1/3 of respondents walk and or use public transit to get to their destinations. and 20% used mobility aids. And these were actually quite high for a group of seniors that we found were generally quite active in our respondents to the survey. So from the survey results, it was clear that for older adults, particularly those who do not drive, an accessible and safe pedestrian environment is critical, both as a means to get to basic necessities such as groceries and doctor's offices, and as well to remain physically active and connected to the community. So to draw attention to the importance of a safe pedestrian environment, the Voices of Burnaby Seniors asked the city to apply for a UBCM grant to do an accessibility assessment. And the city successfully applied for the grant, and we decided that we would do the assessment in the Edmonds Town Centre, one of Burnaby's 4 town centres, because of its concentration of seniors housing, as well as its street-oriented services. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So the city, to do the MAP Edmonds project, the city engaged local residents, the Voices of Burnaby Seniors, and the Burnaby Access Advisory Committee, which is a little committee that we have at the city, to design the assessment process. On assessment day in September 2010, we went out in teams to assess different pedestrian routes in the Edmonds Town Centre. Each team had 1 or 2 staff members from the engineering or planning departments, and a couple of seniors and or people with disabilities, and we also had a few city councillors join us. By walking the routes, the different routes that the citizens had identified, our engineering and planning staff were able to gain first-hand understanding of how people use various accessibility features and how particular designs or existing conditions can either help or hinder a person's mobility. The process led to a number of positive outcomes, including awareness, which was critical to moving things forward, as well as enhancements to the city's standards and designs, including the following: directional curb ramps at crosswalks where possible, better placement of pedestrian control buttons, emphasis on the importance of wider and smooth sidewalks, and especially in high pedestrian areas, and the installation of benches where possible, and benches that are placed properly and not obstructing pedestrians on the sidewalk. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So next, yeah, okay. So based on the success of the MAP Edmonds project, and from feedback we received on the importance of active transportation options during our consultation process for our social sustainability strategy, we held our second accessibility assessment just last week on June 13th. This time the project took place in Cascade Heights, an older neighborhood that will not be going through a lot of redevelopment in the near future. So in other words, we need to figure out what the issues are and work with our existing systems and processes to be able to make some changes. So at the request of the Voices of Burnaby Seniors, we included grade 6 and 7 students, as well as seniors and people with disabilities in this project. We thought it was a great idea to include students because of the importance of promoting active transportation to this generation. And as you know, kids are getting used to being driven around, which is neither good for their health or the environment. To engage students, we based the assessment out of the local elementary school. We worked with a class of grade 6-7 students. Before the assessment day, we got them to talk about the benefits of walking and to map out their routes to school. We used the emission calculator on the Safe Routes to School website so they could see how many emissions they created by being driven to school versus the number of calories they could burn by walking or cycling. So similar to the MAP Edmonds project, on assessment day we went out in teams to assess different pedestrian routes that the students had identified. Each team had a staff an engineering or planning staff member, seniors, people with disabilities, and students. We also had a city councillor join us. And this time we included Fraser Health community health specialists as well, and they were great. To keep the students engaged in the assessment, we got them to be the photographers and to use sidewalk chalk to mark out accessibility features or issues. And this project is so recent that we haven't had a chance to start analyzing the results. But some of the issues that were clearly identified by the participants were the need for clearly marked crosswalks with and traffic calming measures throughout the neighborhood. So that briefly describes these processes. Now I'm going to turn it back to Ian, who's going to explain how we are applying this learning to our actual actions.
Thanks, Margie. Next slide, please. So with all of the learning we've managed to do through these 6 different strategies, and in particular through the MAP projects, we've been able to implement some of these ideas in some of our current projects, and in particular 3 of them, the Central Valley Greenway, our various beautification projects, and through the S-density projects, in which case it's actually been private developers that have been implementing these as they rebuild parts of our streets. Next slide, please. The first of these, the Central Valley Greenway, took advantage of the Map Edmonds information in particular, and we were able to introduce things like directional letdowns, which allows somebody who is visually impaired to find their way across the street very quickly and easily. It also allows people in wheelchairs not to go down into the middle of the intersection, but to be in the path of travel. And of course, in this case, it's facilitating cyclists as well in the city's first cross bike, which legally allows cyclists to ride in a crosswalk. Next slide, please. The Central Valley Greenway also gave us an opportunity to test out street furniture. In this case, these are chairs which allow an elderly person to lift themselves down into a seat and also push themselves out very easily. Next slide, please. Also, the chairs this way allow for people to sit in a conversational way and for them not to be threatened if there are 2 people sitting on a bench together. In this case, what you're seeing here is a picnic table which allows somebody to roll in from the trail in their wheelchair and join their friends at a table. Next slide, please. And the next slide, we're showing the cross-sections of the complete streets that we've developed using all these various different ideas. And in this case, what you're seeing is double rows of street trees with a unidirectional cycle track. So it's an opportunity for cyclists to ride up the street separated from cars and pedestrians. You're seeing rain gardens, which is our environmental strategy, and of course pedestrians in a nice wide sidewalk adjacent to cafes and other outdoor seating areas. And so this is isometric showing how all this fits together in the streetscape on Willingdon Avenue. Next slide, please. And some of these have just begun to be actually implemented. The first of these is a pilot project, and it was implemented before all of our details are completely there together, but it does capture all the different items. Next slide, please. In this case, you'll see that it shows the it's only got a single row of street trees. The second row hopefully will go in this fall. This is very new. It shows you the cycle track, which allows cyclists and also those with other wheeled apparatuses an opportunity to cruise along the streets, separated with rain gardens, and then nice wide sidewalks. Next slide, please. And in this slide, you're seeing how generous the sidewalk is. It's a 3-meter wide sidewalk, which is double our ordinary standard. And this is also a testament to how these things, how funny things slip by. But this is also supposed to be in saw-cut concrete, which allows wheelchairs to pass across the cuts in the concrete in a very smooth sort of fashion, rather than being troweled they actually use a saw to cut the concrete, which for somebody who's got a degenerating spine is a huge asset. Next slide, please. Fortunately, in this project, there is the opportunity for them to roll along the asphalt, which of course is nice and smooth. And this, at the moment, will be used as a bi-directional trail, so cyclists traveling in 2 different directions. But as the road gets reconstructed, and it will through the entire town center, we'll have this on both sides of the street. This is Lougheed Highway, and it'll allow us to switch it so it'll be a single directional for cyclists. Next slide, please. And now I'm turning back to Margie to give us a summary.
So yeah, that basically concludes our presentation. So I hope we've provided some insights into strategies that we're using here in Burnaby to create a healthy built environment for all. So we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Margaret and Ian. I love those wide sidewalks. They look great. You're doing some just super things in Burnaby, so let's get out and visit those as well. I was thinking, I was on a webinar the other day about New York City and what they've done on healthy built environment. Looks like you've actually done most of the things they were talking about, so congratulations. We had one question because, Margaret, you'd mentioned the safe routes to school, and there's a website. If you could send us the contact for that, because Tanya would like to be able to access it, that would be appreciated.
Sure. It's can you hear me?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's actually it's from HASTE, which is the Hub for Action on School Transportation Emissions. It's www.hastebc.org.
Okay.
HASTEBC.org.
Great. Good. Thank you very much. We just wondered, like, when we're doing the project in with the seniors and the school children and those with mobility challenges, were there some common issues, common barriers that they identified, or were they all different?
I think some were common. I mean, tripping hazards and low branches, mailboxes placed at intersections, so it's hard to see who's crossing the road. That affected both kids and people in wheelchairs, for example. Curb ramps were important for moms, of course, with strollers. What else, Ian? Can you think?
And lighting, I guess, is another big important factor for all of them.
Right. Yeah. It makes for safety. Mm-hmm. And how does the signage work for wheeled users? And also, do both wheelchairs and cyclists share the same path? And what about motorized scooters that often many seniors will use? Is it all the same path?
I think, like all communities, we're still trying to sort this out. I think our expectation is that the cycle tracks will primarily be used by people who are able to maintain the same speed as a bike. So it will probably include people in motorized scooters or wheelchairs if they will maintain that speed. But that was why it was so important for us to construct the sidewalks so they were nice and smooth, so that a wheelchair felt just as comfortable traveling on the sidewalk as on our urban trails.
And now the Edmonds project started in 2010. Now I just wondered, have you been able to do any follow-up with the same stakeholders and determine their attitudes about how accessibility has been improved?
Yeah, we did. As part of the whole process, we had to, of course, write a report to the UBCM, but we also reported back to council. And we were able to, which was really great, we were able to do 30 new curb ramps in that area, which made a huge difference for a lot of people in that area. And we reported back to the different groups involved in the process, and we heard they're really pleased about just the awareness that was created around it. it was the walking these routes and having just a dialogue with the engineers and the planners who are designing these, you know, our streets. But it's that one-to-one conversation that took place that really helped develop the understanding. And so I think the participants were really pleased by that process, and they've been able to see some results, so that's great.
Now, Winnie is asking, you obviously have had to spend quite a bit of money to improve the infrastructure, and how do you cover the costs for building that infrastructure?
Well, just for the 30 curb ramps that came in after the Edmonds project, that was, we were able to use an existing fund that we have for accessibility improvements throughout the city, and traditionally we've used that fund to improve our recreation centers, but we've done a lot of improvements at these centers. So now we're using that fund to go out into the community to our streets and do some improvements. But also they're getting done through existing works by just the awareness created around how to do things better, I would say.
That's right. I think the most important thing, I mentioned earlier that changing our MMCD standards, just by creating a new detail for the curb ramps, for instance, it means that every single project that gets built, and there are lots of them all over the city, will start incorporating it automatically by default. And that has more of a profound impact on rebuilding the city than any particular initiative.
Now, you mentioned a fund. Is that a fund just out of taxpayers' dollars that the city has put aside, or where did the fund come from?
Yeah, no, it's a long-standing fund that the city has set aside, and it's in the planning department's budget.
Well, I don't know how many other municipalities do that, but it sounds like a good idea, indeed. Now, you'd also mentioned that you'd had Fraser Health involved in your session recently for the Cascade Heights. And just more generally, though, how have you been able to work with or involve Fraser Health in, and what's been the impact in the development of your healthy built environment planning?
Well, I mentioned that we worked with our Burnaby Access Advisory Committee on the two projects, and that committee's been around for at least 20 years, and we've always had Fraser Health representative at that committee, and the representative is an occupational therapist who really has a good understanding of mobility issues. And so through her participation, we've learned a lot, and now we're just working on developing our healthy community partnership with Fraser Health and what that's going to look like. So having the two Fraser Health staff that joined us for the MAP Cascade Heights is just working to improve our relationship. We've already had it going, but it'll help us when we start to kind of formalize our healthy community partnership.
And Tanya was wondering, how did you get all future work to use the new curb cut design?
Well, it's a very good question.
Kicking and screaming.
That's right, kicking and screaming. Initially, we started off using the beautification project and the Central Valley Greenway as pilots. So nobody felt that they were being adopted as a standard until they had seen them in the ground. As soon as they were in the ground and people saw how very effective they were, our engineering department went through the process of changing their standards, because they have standards to construct all works on city streets. And so the standard for curb letdowns was changed, and then our work crews were taken out on site and shown how these were built. We were fortunate because the City of Vancouver had actually implemented these before we had, and so we were able to use their details and also show our crews how Vancouver had constructed them.
Good. So again, we're all learning from each other, and I'm sure if there's folks on the call that want for more information, they can get in touch with you as well.
They certainly can. We'd be happy to share the detail.
Great. Well, thank you both, Margaret and Ian. You've certainly provided some great examples of both how we can relate the needs of seniors and youth to enhance the built environment so that our neighborhoods are more accessible. And I'm sure that many communities will be able to translate your lessons learned into their own practice as well. So thank you. So now I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Luke Sales. Luke is from the Director of Planning for the town of Qualicum Beach, and I imagine everybody would know that Qualicum Beach is on Vancouver Island. It's a small community, about 8,700 population, I believe. Luke is going to summarize the town's initiatives to improve active transportation for people of all ages, including the Qualicum Cycling Plan and the upcoming Waterfront Master Plan, for which the town was awarded a grant through the Gas Tax Fund. That's something specific in BC for anyone who may be from outside. These projects form part of the town's sustainability plan, for which it recently won a National Sustainability Award from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Green Initiative Fund. So congratulations, Luke, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. A lot of the things that I would say to introduce myself were already said by Mary, so thank you. Next slide. During this brief presentation this morning, I'll give you a little bit of information about Qualicum Beach, summarize why active transportation is especially important for our community and our demographic, and then speak briefly about some of the initiatives that we've completed in the last few years, what we're doing now, and a look into the near future. Next slide. This is my first webinar as a presenter, so I thought it would be useful to share a photo of myself as I'm presenting this today. I can't hear you laughing, but I'm just hoping. Next slide, thank you. As was stated earlier, Qualicum Beach is 30 minutes north of Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, and Nanaimo, for reference, is an hour-and-a-half ferry ride from Vancouver. So we have a population of 8,700. The weather is fairly mild, which of course has an impact seasonally on our active transportation. And I'll describe the geography on the next slide. Qualicum Beach grew over time as a linear community along the coastline and along the highway, which was built to the south. Our geography is such that we're up high on a bluff. That's our town center. And then moving down towards the beach, there's a significant drop in grade. So elevations are an issue when we're talking about trails and pathways throughout the community. But one of the things that Qualicum Beach has as its main assets is a very compact downtown core. Community planning has always been a priority since the town incorporated 75 years ago. So fortunately, we don't have the necessity to connect a range of, say, commercial nodes throughout the whole town. We have a concentrated commercial area and residential areas. Next slide. One of the most unique things about Qualicum Beach is that our demographic is quite old. We have the oldest demographic of any community of any size in Canada. The median age for British Columbia as a whole is 41.9. We're over 20 years older than that. So obviously this has serious implications for the way we plan our city and the way we build our roads, sidewalks, and other transportation infrastructure. Next slide. Of course, there are many reasons for why we would pursue active transportation initiatives, but one of them is greenhouse gas emission reductions. This was identified in our sustainability plan, which was completed several years ago, and of course reinforced by plans as we complete them now. Qualicum Beach has the majority of our greenhouse gas emissions coming from transportation. We don't have major industry, so if we can address the way that people move around our community and steer them more towards active transportation, it'll make a major step towards reducing these greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. Some of the things that we've done in the last few years, I'll just be summarizing them over the next couple slides, including the cycling plan in 2009, what we're doing now, and then next steps. Next slide. The first step in this whole progression, at least recent progression, was the completion of a cycling plan in 2009. Although for many years the official community plan had identified cycling routes and active transportation routes throughout the community, we'd never had the funding or resources to complete a comprehensive look at the whole network to see where we were missing pieces and where we would benefit by expansions. So we put the cycling plan together in 2009, which was timed impeccably with the announcement of several grants. So by putting the pieces in place, by putting the plan together so that we were ready when the grants were announced, we had an application in immediately and we were successful. So the photo that you're looking at here was an active transportation route, a multi-use pathway that's 3 meters long and connects some of the key areas in our town. That was completely grant funding. Next slide. In 2010, we had an event that highlights the fact that we have a lot of partners in this community and around the community. This was an event that was hosted at the town's Civic Center in partnership with Vancouver Island University and several other organizations. This was an event to bring together seniors and municipal officials and researchers from local universities to discuss the issues around moving seniors around on sidewalks and improving mobility for people of all ages. It was a day-long workshop, and I think that everybody learned something that day. It was a great event. Next slide. In 2011, the town completed our review of the official community plan, and it reinforced many of the values that had been highlighted in previous official community plans. This one was unique, though, because it was built around a foundation of sustainability. It was developed together with the sustainability plan. So many of the land use policies that had been around for a long time, now throughout the process of developing this plan, became anchored in the fundamentals of sustainability. And throughout the process, the community identified a vision for 2050 and the way that we'd like to grow and mature as a community. Next slide. This year, we were able to complete a very interesting and rewarding plan that we called the Age-Friendly Transportation Plan. This was funded through the UBCM Age-Friendly Community Planning Grant, and it enabled us to take a step back and look at our transportation infrastructure as a whole and identify ways that it was working for people of all ages and how it might be improved. So specifically, the goals of this plan were to improve mobility by active transportation modes. That means improving existing facilities for pedestrians and cyclists and developing new facilities to improve mobility for active transportation modes and thereby increasing the number of trips by walking, cycling, and transit. The second primary goal of this project was to improve safety for vulnerable road users. As we know, a significant deterrent to walking and cycling is the fear of traffic, and improving safety by improving the design of pedestrian and bicycle facilities not only helps to minimize conflicts between pedestrians, cyclists, and other users, but also reduces the fear of traffic for vulnerable road users. One interesting point here is that it's an age-friendly transportation plan, and when we announced it and first started it, I think the general perception was that we were going to be discussing ways to address the needs of seniors, and of course that's a part of it because we do have an aging community. But the needs of seniors are not dissimilar from the needs of a demographic at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is youth. Before you have a driver's license, you're dependent on active transportation and, of course, rides and public transportation to get around. And the same thing's true of our seniors. So we looked at this age-friendly transportation plan, and throughout the process of developing it, we started describing these groups as vulnerable road users because they're the ones who aren't protected by a 2-ton shell of metal as they fly around our roads. So it was very good, and I think people really benefited from the discussions that we had. And another thing that came out of this plan was a framework for evaluating transportation infrastructure improvements. What this means is that when we get comments from the public. They say, I don't like this crossing here. We don't feel safe here, or we think this intersection can be improved. This plan gave us an evaluation matrix so that we can plug their concerns straight into it, and it goes into our prioritized list of transportation improvements. So when we have money available, we're able to look directly at that list, see if there's any projects we can knock off that are high priority within the budget, and we have a clearly defined and defensible way of saying, yes, let's do this improvement, or no, this isn't the right time because it's not the highest priority. Next slide. Here's another interesting project. The town of Qualicum Beach is bounded on several sides by the regional district of Nanaimo, and then further to the east is the city of Parksville. So obviously for people who aren't in local government, the boundaries between these jurisdictions mean nothing. And so we got together as several jurisdictions and started talking about the potential to mark and provide waypoints along this route, which is actually fairly heavily used. So it took a while. It's amazing how cross-jurisdictional collaboration is not the fastest process, but over the course of several years we identified a route, and this year was the culmination of all that effort. So we did get signs put up, a consistent set of signage throughout the town, into the regional district, and then into Parksville. And so the signs in Qualicum Beach will have an arrow directing to Parksville with a bike and a pedestrian symbol. If you're in Parksville, the other way around, it's directing to Qualicum Beach. So it was a very rewarding project, and of course we're already talking about the next steps. Where do we take this now? Qualicum Beach to name the community. And I think that there's a great potential for jurisdictions working together on this type of signage. Next slide. So from here, where do we go next? Broadly speaking, we're moving towards the big plans and then moving down into specifics to provide details on how we want to improve neighborhoods. And the next one that we're going to be digging into in the next few years is our waterfront. This was highlighted as a priority in the 2009 cycling plan because pedestrians and cyclists and active transportation users don't necessarily feel safe when they're walking or moving up and down the highway on the waterfront. There isn't a continuous pedestrian network. So during the official community plan, people wanted to talk about this. They wanted to know, how are we going to improve our waterfront? How are we going to provide a continuous promenade, or what can we do to improve it? And time again we said, well, we don't really know. And the reason we can't answer these questions right now is that there's too many big questions about how our foreshore will be shaped over the next few decades and centuries with the impacts of climate change, sea level rise, storms, and so on. So we proposed a two-step process. The first would be to do scientific and coastal engineering assessments of our foreshore to evaluate reasonable ways to protect and improve it over time, both from an ecological point of view, economic and social. After the first phase, which we're thinking is going to last about a year, then we'll get into the public consultation. So here's where the active transportation comes into it again. Based on a sound foundation established by the research throughout the first year, then we can have a real meaningful discussion on how to improve active transportation. And we'll dig into cycling and walking, urban design, connectivity, tourism, and so on and so forth. So that one's ramping up now, and we're very excited on it. We're hoping to have a request for proposals out this summer and begin the project in the fall. Beyond the waterfront master plan, I would say that the general strategy is just small incremental improvements, because we now have most of the plans in place. We know where the missing links are, and whenever an opportunity comes up, we have a project that's available for it. So it might be that $25,000 in funding comes up and we say, oh, great, well, I have a $25,000 project and it's important. Or maybe there's a larger grant opportunity. It's $500,000. Well, you know what? I have one of those too. So putting the plans in place allows us to make these incremental improvements over time, and so far it's been a successful strategy, and I hope it will be continuing to be valuable in the future. Next slide.
Great. Well, thank you, Luke. Really interesting that a community of the size of Qualicum Beach, only 8,700 people, can be doing all these extremely creative things. You'd mentioned a framework, and Tanya has asked, is that framework, I think, was to establish priorities for active transportation. Yes. Is that framework available for others to utilize?
Yes, certainly. It's available on the town's website, but it's embedded in the complete report. But I'd be happy to send that to you, and if you'd like to send it on to
that would be great.
Anyone else who requests it, I can do that.
Okay. And I recall visiting you a couple of years ago when you were in the early stages of developing your active transportation work, and it's great to see all the things that you've done since. I just wondered, I mean, how has this come about? A small community. It's obviously active transportation is a big priority, and has this sort of always been the case? Was it as a result of champions? What was the role of the politicians in moving this forward? How's it actually happened?
I would say that it's come largely from the community. For many years, we've done quality of life surveys in conjunction with all of our official community plan reviews, and they continually highlight the fact that people love walking, people love cycling, people love to get outside and and move their bodies, and this is people of all ages. So, for example, walking is the #1 recreational activity of people in the town. Cycling is the second. So it doesn't take long for any planner, politician, administrator, anybody to put the dots together and see that this is a valuable project to pursue in the community. So I think it really came from the community, and we've just been pushing it probably a little bit harder in the last 5 or 10 years.
Now, you'd mentioned, of course, walkers, cyclists, and now motorized scooters. I'm sure you've got lots of those with the aging community. How do you make sure that they interact effectively and without conflict?
This is something that we're digging into more now. I'd have to say that it's not something we have the answers to. As you know, motorized scooters are considered to be pedestrians in all legal frameworks, so they're allowed to be on the sidewalks. They're allowed to be on the roads, moving in the same direction as a pedestrian would. But the fact that they're not the same size, shape, and travel at a different speed as pedestrians creates some interesting issues. But as we develop and we build things and let other people build things in the town, we're looking towards this. And one of the things we've done in recent years is required scooter parking in new developments and outside developments. And as we build trails and networks, we're building them with surfaces that aren't difficult for these motorized scooters, because we know that as people are getting older and our demographic is continuing to age, we're seeing more of these. So people need a place to store them. They need a place to park them outside of the places they want to go, and they need surfaces that they can ride on easily. So
I think you're kind of on the leading, you're on the leading edge. So what you learn and what you're able to do in this issue will be helpful to many others who are also going to be facing it as well.
Certainly.
I just wondered, has healthy eating kind of entered into any of your planning as you're looking at this in terms of creating spaces for healthy food stores or restricting drive-in restaurants? I don't know if you've got much sort of strip malls forgotten. Welcome. Is this part of what you look at?
Well, there's two facets to what you just asked. Yes, we've done food initiatives in the past, and I think that in the future there will be more initiatives regarding food. We have some people in the community that are pushing this very hard, so that the local government hasn't really had to do that much. There's a community gardens in each of the schools, and we have a community garden that's owned by the municipality. But then the second question was, well, what do you do to regulate and manage fast food and other types of food establishments that aren't quite as healthy? So the town is actually pretty unique in that we do not allow fast food. It's simply just not a permitted use in any of the zones within the town. Similarly, we prohibit drive-throughs. And any restaurant in the town actually has to provide table service. So this is a unique way to regulate the way that restaurants operate, and it essentially prohibits most of the types of restaurants that you'd see, like your Subways and your Tim Hortons and all those types of restaurants that, well, they may be more or less healthy in some ways, but they don't provide table service, and they therefore won't come into the town. This has been something that people are pretty strongly committed to.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. Yeah. Thank you. I think there's another question here from Adam. From a small town perspective, how important is grant money, or are there other funding arrangements available for active transportation and cycling projects?
In a small community like ours, grant funding is absolutely essential, I would say. I think that maybe in larger communities with larger tax bases, it's easier to sell, maybe having a fixed budget each year to do active transportation improvements. We take the attitude that whenever a grant comes up, we find the project that fits for it. And so we have a menu of different projects on the go, and whatever funding is available, we pick the project that fits that grant, and we move forward with it. So in terms of ongoing funding or other sources of funding, I think that there actually are a lot of very cost-effective ways to improve active transportation, like painting stripes on roads. It's certainly nowhere near as effective as a separated bike path, but something as simple as painting can make a major improvement. So it's not always big money items, but certainly for major transportation infrastructure improvements, grant funding is essential for small communities.
Now, Hazel is wondering, Luke, how you've been able to restrict fast food in your zoning bylaw. Do you understand you can have prohibitions against drive-throughs, but how can you prohibit fast foods?
The way that we regulate fast food is by requiring table service. So a fast food restaurant does not provide table service, and our planning system is such that we can regulate the types of uses and the way they operate. We can't regulate people. We can't regulate ownership. So we couldn't pass a bylaw that says no franchises. But if we require table service and someone makes a business license application for a business that does not provide table service, then we deny it. So it's a strange little point of leverage that we have, and it's the table service aspect. We had an application from Subway. I think it would have been maybe 15 years ago. It was before I started working here, but at that time the choice was put to them. Well, if you want to come into the town, you have to provide table service. Are you willing to change your corporate practices to provide table service? And they said no. They couldn't make that change. So by that simple requirement of table service, we've precluded most of the fast food type restaurants from operating in the town.
And Trish is wondering, does your town restrict smoking in outdoor public places, the playgrounds and parks, by bylaw or other means? I know a number of municipalities are doing that. Have you been able to do that?
We have a regulation on smoking within a certain distance of municipal buildings, but we don't have any regulations on parks and playgrounds.
As yet. That'll come, I'm sure. Right. And then also, Gerline was wondering if you could shed more light on how you were able to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions pertaining to planning.
Well, this is ongoing, and active transportation is one of the biggest initiatives that we have and biggest opportunities we have moving forward. Because over 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions come directly from transportation, that's the chunk that we think we can take the biggest bite out of. So investments in active transportation, like the multi-use pathway that we built several years ago and some of the pathways that are going in now, those are the things that are going to make active transportation more appealing for people. It's going to provide them with a better option that's more convenient, safe, and more pleasant to move around. So at that point, they'll choose to use active transportation instead of hopping in their car.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Kelly, Margaret, Ian, and Luke. You're all inspirational, doing great things. What we'd like to do now is open up the floor again to our participants and basically ask everyone to brainstorm with us. Tell us all the measures to support a healthier built environment that you are working on in your own communities or that you would like to find support for. Maybe give us a few details, just put it in that question box, and perhaps we can find some common themes for future work together. I understand, for example, there's some folks here from Burns Lake, and they're working on the idea of whiteways, dealing with snow as a positive rather than a negative. Interesting idea. That came up in another webinar I was on recently. What else are you working on? I gather in Gibson's you're working on a Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and active transportation is being prioritized there too. I guess we've got another question back here to Luke, actually. In terms of evaluation, has there been anything done to estimate the level of reduction of greenhouse emissions as a result of the active transportation initiatives you've described?
Well, not really. That's the simple answer. But the reason is that the way we track the number of people that are walking, cycling, using active transportation is through the census. And because we're a part of a census agglomeration that includes the city of Parksville and some of the regional district, we don't really have specific data on how well we're improving. So we don't have an effective way of measuring it because we haven't done any travel diaries or surveys to evaluate it. But I think it's fairly apparent. All you have to do is walk around and look at the number of people out riding their bikes or on our trails, and it's clearly increasing. So unless there's more people that are coming from outside of our community and driving in and walking around on our roads and streets and pathways, I would say it's pretty clear these people are choosing to walk or ride instead of driving.
Now, I'm not sure if our panelists will be able to answer this, but Kathy is suggesting that she's heard of some northern European communities that are heating their sidewalks in downtown cores, especially by the shopping areas, so they don't have to do snow removal, and walking and wheeling is therefore really popular. I'm wondering if any BC communities are doing this or thinking of doing it. I don't know if any of our panelists know about that, but if there's anybody on the line, perhaps you can just respond in the question box, because I know this is a big issue and it's come up in a number of different areas. Do any of our panelists have any feedback on that or any knowledge of that? I don't think any of you are in the snow country.
That's what I was going to say, is that we don't have much snow, so it's not an issue.
You don't have much snow, yeah. But certainly we've got lots of communities that do. Adam is mentioning that the town of Smithers is trying to implement some new bike lanes, but due to road width, some on-street parking will have to be removed. I guess that creates a problem. So how did Qualicum Beach, did you do something similar, and how did you deal with it?
Well, it's easy to do when you're putting in a new road. It's a lot easier to convince someone that the town would benefit more by putting in a pathway than by adding more parking spaces. But as you've noted, it's a challenge when you're removing something. So I think the research and documentation that's been done in other places would probably be more useful. I mean, I know this is a heated debate in places like New York City and Vancouver. We just haven't dealt with it that much. We haven't had to remove parking spaces because in most of the cases we've put in the transportation infrastructure from the start.
So that is easier. I know it's a real challenge to do it the other way around. We've had a couple of comments here about, again, coming back to the issue of snow being a huge impediment. And are there any communities doing snow maintenance on trails? I guess, Kelly, you probably don't need to do that in Mission, but have you heard of others who are?
You know, yeah, we typically don't. We don't do a lot of maintenance in the winter time. And a lot of our trails are less than 400 meters elevation, so again, not significantly covered with snow, but our groups tend to use them where there is snow on them as well. So we don't remove the snow there, and then we do, of course, leaf blowing and that to protect the trail surfaces in the fall and the spring.
Right. Nikki has mentioned something I think is important to all our communities in BC, that love to see more awnings to protect people from the rain, which is sometimes a barrier to active transportation. And she said she'd heard a very interesting talk from Michael Geller, an architect, on that, so we can look that up as well. I gather there's some good examples in other communities of what you're doing, and we'll be glad to share those with you. Richmond, I gather, has been trying to create links through neighborhoods for pedestrians and bikes, and cutting routes between cul-de-sacs to connect through a suburban environment. Seattle has created a food forest, including edible plants and new plantings. And Burnaby, Margaret, you found a solution to putting bikes on roads without losing parking. Do you want to comment on that?
It was me who put that in there.
Okay.
Ian. We're also faced with a conundrum. We have a lot of competition for the road right away. I don't know how many people on the line are familiar with this, but typically our roads are 66 feet wide, or 20.1 meters, and there's a lot of competition for how that space is going to get used. And the solution that we found was, and we didn't show it in any of our slides, but what we're starting to build this in our town centers, is to have 3-meter wide sidewalks which are right up against the property line, and then we've stuck the trees in where a parking space would normally be, and so we've sort of got pods of parking in between each street tree, and that's allowed us to have 3-meter wide multi-use sidewalks on both sides of the street to have parking, have large street trees, and still permit 2 cars to pass each other on the street.
Oh, we'll have to come out and have a look at that. That's great. Well, I think we're getting towards the end of the webinar. We do have another question that we would like to ask everybody about. Certainly we know that funding is a motivating factor in order to move ahead with active transportation, but are there other resources that would help you move forward on these issues in your communities? We at BCHLA are working with a number of partners to use our networks and resources to support local government. So we'd love to get your responses to the following question. We're going to put the poll up now. What type of resources would be helpful to your community in moving forward on healthier built environment issues? And please answer as many as you think are important to you. There's 5 different options. Just we're getting your votes up there, and just while we're doing that, Nikki again has mentioned that working for a nonprofit that champions the use of arts for promoting health and wellness, so would be interested in possible collaborations that integrate and use the arts for building healthier communities. That's a really interesting issue, Nikki. I'm glad you've raised it. I don't know whether any of our panelists have any comments on that. Certainly seen it in some other communities where the arts on the street is an important part of what they're doing, and some of that happens in Vancouver, I know. But if anyone is interested in that, please get in touch with us and we'll connect you with Nikki. So the poll results, 89% would like dialogue with other communities with similar interests. So that's certainly something that we can help to facilitate, whether it's listservs or webinars. 84% would like online resources, and thirdly, examples of zoning or bylaw ordinances, and that came up today, Luke, in some of the work that you're doing. So I think that we have a few more minutes, but I'm not sure that we have one more question, but I'm not sure it's to the panelists. I think we'll have to follow up. It was about someone had mentioned about a webinar with respect to snow removal, so we'll follow up for you with that, Tanya, as well. So you've had some great questions and great presentations. I hope that you've learned a great deal from the examples that are provided by the panel. As they've all said, if you wish to follow up with them, please do so. And certainly we all know that by building to make healthy choices, the easier choices, both for our youngest and our oldest citizens and everyone else between, we're going to help to make our whole communities focus much more on better health. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Kelly, Margaret, Ian, and Luke. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and insights with us today. And thanks to all who've been part of our audience today for your attention and thoughtfulness and your questions. We're so glad you could join us. We're going to be following up with a short survey. I hope you'll respond, as it really helps us to learn from these events what's working and where we could do better next time. And we will be continuing with our webinar series, so watch for your inbox in the fall for our next topic. We'll hope you'll all join us again, and in the meantime, have a very healthy, active, and safe summer. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you.